If you were a WWII pilot, silence could mean survival. One careless radio transmission and German signals intelligence could triangulate your position in seconds. The Luftwaffe and Allies weren't just fighting with bullets, they were at war with sound. That's why elite pilots developed silent signals so subtle that even today many are still misunderstood or completely overlooked by mainstream documentaries. These weren't just wing wobbles or random formation changes. These were coded movements that meant the difference between life and being scrap metal on a French field. Most civilians think WWII communication was all radios and Morse code. But what happens when your radio's shot out? When you're behind enemy lines? When your squadron's being tailed and one wrong move gives away your plan? That's when the real professionals switch to a silent language shared only by those who'd survived long enough to learn it. Today, we're going deep into 9 covert pilot signals that trick the enemy without a single word spoken, and how the same principles can still be applied by anyone serious about covert survival communication. Let's break open the signals they never intended to declassify. The deliberate wing rock was a covert mission sync tool, not a greeting. Many think wing rocking was just a casual acknowledgement, but among experienced RAF and USAAF pilots, 2 slow symmetrical wing rocks before crossing the channel meant stay tight, radio silence from here. A fast double twitch, however, warned of enemy presence without confirming visual contact. In survival terms today, a controlled body motion or repeated physical pattern can silently organize a team without alerting observers. Useful in evasion or urban escape scenarios. Formation spacing shifts were tactical battle instructions disguised as drift. The average German pilot might see a slight spread in American bomber escort formations and assume fatigue or loose flying. But specific spacing meant different roles. In the 8th Air Force, a 2-plane-length backward drift by the wingman communicated readiness to dive on ground targets after bomb drop. Modern survivalists can apply this by establishing coded positional patterns while moving in teams. One formation for safe, another for watchful, another for ready to act. Tail waggling signalled enemy presence and deception planning simultaneously. A subtle 2-phase tail wag, often less than 3 degrees each side, meant an enemy fighter was spotted without revealing if it was above or below. A sharper, singular wag was the signal to prepare a feint manoeuvre. Luftwaffe pilots reportedly used a downward tail twitch to suggest they'd spotted the enemy before breaking into cloud cover. Translating this today, controlled directional signals can warn of threats without verbally describing them. Ideal for stealth operations, hiking under surveillance, or escape and evasion drills. Flashlight Morse from canopy reflections bypassed radio jamming. In night sorties, especially among RAF Mosquito crews, pilots used angled reflective flashes off cockpit glass to send Morse bursts to wingmen. This allowed navigation updates even when German Naxos detectors jammed standard transmission. A similar technique is still practical. A small mirror or reflective surface can silently send signals across distance during survival conditions when sound risks detection. Rudder taps were silent abort signals during bombing runs. Veteran bomber pilots developed a quick rudder pulse system. A rapid left-right snap of the aircraft tail, barely visible from outside the squadron's line of sight, but clearly detectable to trained escorts. This usually signalled bomb bay malfunction or abort drop reposition. On foot or in tactical covert movement today, a subtle two-step halt or heel scrape pattern could serve the same purpose as a silent shared decision marker. Evasive roll deceleration warned of anti-aircraft fire before visual confirmation. Some pilots executed a shallow barrel roll with deliberate deceleration not to evade fire, but to warn the squadron of expected flak ahead. Any untrained observer would assume pilot fatigue or turbulence compensation. For practical use, this illustrates how an exaggerated movement disguised as accidental can silently warn allies while deceiving watchers. You know, canopy hand signals were coded in sequence, not just single gestures. Hollywood often makes it look like a simple thumbs up explained everything, but in reality, World War II pilots, especially those in the Pacific, used multi-step sequences. For example, 2 fingers extended, then a fist, then a palm. Each sequence had a specific meaning, like an altitude shift, fuel status, or a split maneuver. Even today, survivalist teams can develop their own sequential signals rather than relying on simple one-offs, making the code far harder to detect or interpret. Now, dive initiation cues, they were often hidden in engine throttle audio changes. Experienced wingmen learned to detect the pilot leader's intent by listening for subtle RPM fluctuations before a dive. The enemy, well, they couldn't see the throttle shift and could only react after the movement began. In modern applications, using mechanical or sound cues, like intentionally dropping an item or using rhythmic movement, can prepare your group to act before outsiders detect your intent. Landing approach lights, they created false trail signals to mislead enemy spies. Some squadrons, especially those on improvised airfields, used light blink patterns not only to communicate landing order, but to purposely confuse German intelligence watching from a distance. A false triple blink entry pattern made observers believe more planes were landing than actually existed, effectively masking losses or squadron numbers. In the modern world, misdirection through repeated false markers remains one of the best counter-surveillance tactics. These pilots, well, they weren't just flying planes. They were fluent in an airborne code that sadly died with many of them, unless we continue to uncover it. If you're serious about history or about silent communication under pressure, these signals aren't just interesting, they're a toolkit. If you want more breakdowns of forgotten tactics that the textbooks missed, subscribe to Relic Logic, drop a comment with the code you'd like us to decode next, and share this with someone who still thinks World War II was all radio chatter and luck.